James Gunn's brand new DC universe has arrived with David Corenswet playing our brand new Man of Steel. Hi, my name's Zach, and today we are finally reviewing my most anticipated movie of the year, Superman. Like many of you, I started this YouTube channel because I cannot watch a movie without needing to talk about it afterwards. And if that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, be sure to comment all your thoughts and opinions or anticipation for Superman down in the comment section below. I know a lot of us are super excited for this coming up, so I'm sure you guys have a lot to share of your own thoughts and opinions in the comments, and I want to see your story. For me, this was not my most anticipated movie of the year because I love Superman. If you've been watching my review series that I was doing leading up to this film, reviewing each and every Superman film, you know that I didn't really grow up with this character. It wasn't a character that interested me all that much. I was very much anticipating Superman because of James Gunn. I'm a huge fan of James Gunn. I love what he's done in Marvel with Guardians of the Galaxy. I love what he did in DC with the Suicide Squad. I even love, or at least like, his previous movies, Super and Sinister. So there hasn't been a James Gunn movie that I haven't liked yet. When he was announced, unbelievably, it was 2 years ago, time flies like crazy, that he was taking over DC Studios. In fact, that they were starting a DC Studios. He was co-CEO with Peter Safran, and they were going to launch a brand new DC universe. I was so excited to see what James Gunn was going to bring to the table. I liked the DCEU well enough. There's a lot of entries in there that I did like and still like watching to this day, but overall, the universe itself did lose me a little bit as it went on, and it never really felt like it had much of an aim or a purpose after Zack Snyder kind of left the picture of the DCEU. So, getting this revamp, getting this brand new introduction to a new DC universe with new actors and new characters, I was absolutely all for it. And with James Gunn being the helm of the creative side of all of these projects, like I said, love what he did with Marvel, love what he did in DC already. I had full faith in Gunn. In my opinion, Gunn felt like he was bulletproof. So how did that come about on the big screen with Superman? Let's talk about what worked about Superman for me. And with James Gunn launching this brand new DCU, a lot of my questioning was, how is he going to go about this universe? And James Gunn, with his very first outing in Superman, he fully immerses you. In fact, he plunges you into the deep end of the DCU. This is very much an already established world with very colorful characters, a lot of heroes about in this world. What James Gunn really succeeded at with Superman was getting these characters casted. I liked everyone across the board in this film, and I felt like every actor perfectly inhabited the character that they were playing. This is probably my favorite Lois Lane that we've gotten since Margot Kidder. Rachel Brosnahan was a great Lois Lane. On top of that, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor was so deliciously fun to watch as this maniacal madman, just evil person. He takes evil in this movie to extents that no Lex Luthor has ever taken evil to. And Nicholas Hoult is chewing up the scenery. He is loving every second that he is playing this character, and he's very entertaining. David Corenswet as Superman. Again, this wasn't a character that I grew up with loving. I'm not an expert on this character. My favorite rendition of Superman up until this point has been Christopher Reeve. But David Corenswet, I think, is probably going into either the second or third slot very comfortably. I really enjoyed his Superman. He's a very earnest, he's a very positive, and in some ways innocent and naive Superman. But in that, David Corenswet brings a lot of likability to the Superman character. After Christopher Reeve, he's definitely the most likable Superman that I've seen on screen. And aside from Superman and his main cast of friends, you've also got the Justice Gang in this film with Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific. And when it comes to the incorporation of those characters into this Superman story, I think the way that Gunn incorporated them works really well to further establish the world that Superman lives in, because Superman in this movie is shown to be an outlier to the rest of his superhero companions. He is constantly trying to save lives, to corny effects sometimes. If there's a squirrel in danger, he's going to save the squirrel, and I'm not just exaggerating. That happens in this movie. But it's not silly to the point where I rolled my eyes. It was endearing. I really liked it. And then when you contrast that to the rest of the heroes in this universe, where they don't care as much about saving as many lives as possible. They just want to get the job done, even if that means killing the foe that they are fighting. The way that Superman and the Justice Gang butt heads on this issue is a lot of fun, especially when it's led by Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner, this Green Lantern who, while he is a hero, he's also a bit of a jerk, and him and Superman are on polar opposites when it comes to their ideologies, their attitudes, and just their personalities. So when you get those two characters up against each other in this film, I thought they were a lot of fun. Along with characters that I thought worked really well together, Lois and Superman together in this film, they're definitely my favorite since Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. I thought the chemistry between Rachel Brosnahan and David Corenswet was fantastic. There's a scene where Lois interviews Superman. You've seen it in the trailers. In the movie, it goes on for like 6 or 8 minutes or whatever it was. It was by far my favorite scene in the movie because not only did it give you the most insight into Superman as a character and the relationship between Lois and Superman in the film, but it was just a really fascinating conversation that brought a lot of interesting ideas to the Superman film that we hadn't really seen on screen, at least not presented before in this way. Also, of course, with James Gunn, you've got to have a fun animal companion, and with that, we got Krypto the Superdog in this film. And what I will say about Krypto the Superdog is he was all over the marketing. When they were promoting Superman, he was basically the forefront of this film, and I think James Gunn did a really great job using Krypto sparingly in this movie, where when Krypto does show up, he's adorable, he's fun. He does add levity and some comedic senses to the story and to the movie, but he's not overdone. James Gunn doesn't overdo it with Krypto. When Krypto pops up, it feels appropriate for Krypto to pop up. It feels fun, and it never felt like, to me, that Krypto overstayed his welcome, which I was a little bit worried about going into the film. Of course, going from Superman and Lois, you got to talk about Superman and his arch nemesis, Lex Luthor. Now, I've already talked about how I thought Nicholas Hoult was a lot of fun as a character. When it comes to the conflicts between Superman and Lex Luthor, David Corenswet and Nicholas Hoult do a lot to carry these characters' conflicts. And in that way, while we'll get into some of the writing stuff in the next segment that we'll talk about, but as far as the chemistry of foes and enemies that David Corenswet and Nicholas Hoult bring to Lex Luthor and Superman, my favorite since Christopher Reeve and Gene Hackman brought it to the screen. I think that you can really feel how at odds these characters are, and a lot of it is one-sided from Lex Luthor, where this Lex Luthor, he just despises Superman. He hates Superman. And you feel his hatred for Superman throughout the entire movie. And Superman in this movie, he never really fully understands why Lex hates him. And you kind of get the idea that he doesn't really think that much about it either, which only drives Lex crazier with his hatred. So I think James Gunn did a really great job of getting all of these characters down and presenting them in a very likable way with a very likable cast that definitely helps to elevate every one of these characters. Because when it comes to the story and the writing of this film, I'm not gonna lie, as excited as I was for this movie, it left me a lot to be desired. And unfortunately, we gotta move on to what didn't work for me about Superman in this regard. And when it comes to James Gunn's writing, like I mentioned before, I've liked every single James Gunn movie up until this point. And I think that his writing is consistently fun, full of humor, but also a good balance of tones for the most part throughout. He definitely did it throughout the Guardians movies. I think his balance of tone and heart and humor and characters was great in Guardians of the Galaxy. But he also was just director and writer, at least for the last two Guardians of the Galaxy. He co-wrote the first Guardians of the Galaxy with someone else. But now he's CEO, director, writer, not just on Superman, but he also wrote Peacemaker Season 2 back-to-back to Superman, as well as Creature Commandos, which came out earlier this year. And I think James Gunn, I think he just got overwhelmed this year with how much he was taking on. And I felt like a lot of that came across in Superman. I talked about how James Gunn just plunges you into this DCU. And I enjoyed this world that he has made. I enjoyed the characters in it. I liked the way it looked. I enjoyed the action sequences. But unfortunately, by just establishing this, having this world established already and plunging us into it, it made a lot of elements of this world feel very underdeveloped to me, especially when it comes to the story of this film. This film starts off in the middle of a story already. And a lot of stuff that this movie is dealing with happened off screen before the movie even began. And there's some text at the beginning of this film that does lead you into where this movie is kind of placing you off when you first enter it in a very simplistic way that's able to, you just kind of get it. It's very understandable. And I was kind of like, all right, I'm in as soon as that text came on. But when the movie started for real, there's already characters that have conflict with Superman that's introduced. There's already all of these conflicts that Superman has started with the public that get introduced. And it all happens before the movie even begins. And we're in the middle of how Superman is dealing with the aftermath of those conflicts. And to me, that was a big detriment to the movie, because what that did was it immediately caused a disconnect for me with the emotion of what was going on and what he was dealing with when this film starts. Gunn obviously had a lot of ideas of how he wanted this universe to look and how he wanted people to view Superman and how he wanted Superman to be viewed by not just the public but also by his peers. And in that, he adds a lot of ideas, a lot of subplots to this film that really just put a weight on this film that I never felt like the movie was able to stand up under. There's some stuff in here about Superman's true purpose, what his Kryptonian parents really wanted for him versus what his human parents when he landed on Kansas and was raised wanted for him. And there's a little bit of an identity crisis that Superman kind of has throughout this movie. But because there's so many other ideas that Gunn is trying to tackle in this film, a lot of what's going on with Superman's crisis identity with his Kryptonian parents and his human parents, his earthly parents, it kind of gets lost throughout the entire second act of the film. There's also conflict going on in this film involving the idea that Superman should be able to go over and stop wars in other countries. Should he be able to stop wars in other countries? Or how much freedom should the Superman have to interfere with conflicts throughout the earth? And that's another very interesting idea that's very underdeveloped and isn't really able to be that explored because Gunn can't keep his focus on all the things he's trying to do in this film. In this film, he's trying to tell a Superman story. He's trying to set up characters to fill out the rest of the DCU with the Justice Gang. He's trying to establish what this universe thinks of Superman. He's trying to establish the role that Lex Luthor plays in all of these conflicts with Superman. And by trying to put all these ideas and all of these subplots into the movie, he's not able to give time to all of them that they deserve. And by the end of it, all of these ideas and all of these subplots start to feel underserved as the movie goes on. And because Gunn has decided that we are going to jump into this world in the middle of these people's stories, inevitably he has to catch us, the audience, up with where the world is at. And that leads to this movie having a lot of exposition when it comes to characters talking to each other. There's a lot of conversations in this movie where characters are just reminding them how they met or what their beef is with each other or what their relationship to each other is, only because we, the audience, don't know about these yet and we have to play catch up with these characters. And when you are establishing a new world and you're establishing new characters, you're establishing a whole new DC universe, and we kind of have to play catch up to it already. I felt like that was another detriment to the writing of this movie and this story in particular that Gunn inserted into the film. And Gunn is also a very hardcore comic book fan, and I think that he might live in a little bit of a bubble when it comes to that comic book fandom, because I don't think he thought all that much about the casual audience when making this film. There's also a character in here who he has a significant role in the final battle with Superman, but his origin story, which is a pretty interesting origin story, also happened before the movie started. So when he popped up at the end of the film, I didn't really have any connection, or it didn't really resonate with me, because according to the movie, Lex Luthor, he set this up, before the movie even began. So there's not even a moment in the movie where I can trace back and go, oh, Lex did that, which led to this character. No, it happened before I even got into the movie theater. So there's just a lot of issues I find with how Gunn decided to write and execute this movie, because it feels like he was overwhelmed with how he wanted to get the universe just going. He has a bunch of projects already on the go, set up, and make no mistake, Superman does set up future projects. Even though James Gunn said the DCU isn't going to have like this overarching story, and yes, some projects will lead into other ones, but you can just jump into the DCU and you'll be fine. There's definitely some characters and some story lines and plots in here that aren't resolved, and they will be resolved in future projects. And as someone who loves the MCU, and the MCU will do stuff like that too, they built up to it. Like when you look at the first Iron Man film, they didn't care about the world, they cared about the character of Tony Stark. And once they got you to love Tony Stark and understand his story, then they started to add more characters and more to the world as they fleshed it out over multiple movies. Superman doesn't care too much about setting up the characters as much as it cares about setting up this universe to have future stories and characters in. And in that way, it does have a little remnants to the DCEU to me, which is a bit of a bummer. I was hoping James Gunn would be able to bring something fresh and a little bit newer, and this is definitely newer. It's definitely a lighter tone and a lighter Superman story and character that we've had in the past, but it also made a lot of the same choices and, in my opinion, mistakes that the DCU has made in the past. And right off the gate with this movie, James Gunn goes big and bold and comic booky. There's a lot of concepts in here that even someone like me, who's a comic book movie fan, I love comic book movies, I've been watching them pretty much all my life. There's some stuff in here where he just throws it at you like, whoa, okay, that's a little wacky, that's a little out there, and there's no explanation for it. It just, you have to accept it. This is the world that you are in, and you just have to accept it. No explanations, no questions asked. And I think that was a little bit more to put on the audience than James Gunn might have thought. It was definitely a lot more to put on me than I thought. And so walking out of this movie, I was a little bit more mixed and more conflicted than I was originally intending to be on this film. Overall, I am positive on this film. I think superficially, it is a lot of fun. You do have some James Gunn humor in here, although I didn't feel like James Gunn's humor in this movie overtook the movie as much as it would, like, say, Guardians of the Galaxy. And it was still fun, and the characters were fun, and the action was fun, and I think that he did a good job of establishing this Superman, and I think he created a fun DC Universe world. But I also think that he may have bit off more than he could chew by writing this movie while doing Creature Commandos, while writing Peacemaker Season 2, and then shooting this movie while he's also doing CEO, responsibilities for the studio, getting ready to shoot Peacemaker Season 2. I think he was overwhelmed, and I think it shows in the product of this film. This is a pretty messy story. It's a pretty all-over-the-place kind of script. I don't think that James Gunn had a straight focus on what was the best Superman story to tell. I feel like his focus was more, how do I kickstart the DCU fast and furious? And for some people, as I've been seeing online, they're going to love that approach. They're going to love that this movie just fast and furious, hits the pedal to the metal, just goes, doesn't slow down, doesn't stop. They've read all the comic books and they love all this stuff. Someone who doesn't read Superman comic books, someone who just watches the movies and comes into the movie theater hoping to have a good time. I think that this movie, as its own movie, it didn't fully work for me. And I felt like it was pretty jumbled and messy, but I also still enjoyed it. I had fun. I do want to see where other projects in this universe goes. I do want to see what James Gunn has more in store for us, and I'm very curious to see how other movies like, say, Clayface, which is supposed to be this body horror film written by Mike Flanagan, is going to fit in the same universe as this goofy, corny, at times over-the-top cartoony Superman film. So I'm on the borderline of a weak recommend and a solid recommend, and I feel like I almost need an in-betweener to really, because I like this movie. I am positive on this movie. I had a good time with the movie. It is a thumbs up. I just found a lot of issues with the movie and with this being a kickoff to a brand new universe that's supposed to bring the audience back who rejected the DCEU. And I felt like there was just a little bit too much of more of the same. I would akin this movie to Black Adam. I don't like this as much as Black Adam. I think that Black Adam is not as good as Superman, but there was a lot in this movie that reminded me of Black Adam, with the Justice Gang and obviously the Justice Society being in there, the at-odds of Hawkman and Black Adam being kind of like Superman and Guy Gardner in this movie. So, bottom line, I'm going to give this a solid recommend, but it's more of a soft recommend. I don't think the negatives overtake the positives all that much. I think the positives outweigh the negatives for sure, so I'm not going to do a weak recommend, but I do think that some people, if you can't just go with it, if you can't just roll with it, and you're going to be asking more from the story like me, you may come out a little bit disappointed like I did, but overall, I do think that Superman is still a pretty good time, and I enjoyed myself at the theater. Tell me down below what you thought of Superman. I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts and opinions on this one, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Check out other Superman reviews right up there. Down there is the most recently uploaded video to the channel. I appreciate you all. Don't just watch movies, talk movies, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.